My name is John Irwin Adkins Jr., 73. Where to begin? Where to begin? 5 years in U.S. Air Force, Vietnam. A lot of time I spent in Great Britain, Air Force Base in Great Britain. Uncle Sam paid for me to go to Oxford University, Queen's College. I got double majored, double minored, or as they call it, read. What do you read as opposed to what do you major in this country? Political science, political economics, physics, and philosophy. I went in the Air Force in '69. Basic training, flight school took a little over a year. 1970, went to Great Britain. So eventually I get discharged in '74, come back to what in the military is called the world, for that expression, right? America is the world, and the rest of the world, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but obviously not the world, because this is the world. Interesting. So I came home, and now I'm married. Actually, I met a young woman who was a medical student. She was from Jamaica. I met her in England, and we got married in '72. So I brought her with me and went to work for the Chicago Defender. And that was for roughly not quite 2 years. Good experience. Really, really good experience. When you're talking about the element and the necessity of having that understanding, so you represent and you comprehend the whole and not just segments of the whole. Otherwise, your knowledge is incomplete, right? The Defender represented that for me. I knew a lot about Chicago, educated here in Chicago. Not born here, but raised here. Born in Jamaica, actually, but my family came when I was 7, came here. Lived in Inglewood, which is an interesting story too. Inglewood, when I was a kid, was a completely different community than what it is now. When people think of Inglewood today, the area around 63rd and Halsted, for example, that shopping district, right? In the late 1950s, into the 60s, into the mid 1960s, that was the second busiest shopping district in the city of Chicago, next to downtown Chicago. It was amazing. At that point in time, too, Inglewood was, frankly, predominantly white. But it was a thriving community. Incredible. And the schools, I went to Nicholas Copernicus Grammar School through 6th grade. Only went up to 6th grade, had to transfer to a middle school for 7th and 8th. But I like to think I got a really, truly remarkable education. I graduated from middle school, went to Tilden. The Defender, when I started, they had me I covered the police beat and police headquarters that was on State Street, down around 12th and State Street. And I covered municipal courts down here on 51st and Wentworth, the adult and the juvenile court. 5 days a week, getting there early in the morning and sitting and watching justice dispensed. A real education, a real education. And something that I had started doing in the Air Force, and I continued doing it when I went to the Defender, and I continued doing it as a journalist, period. And that is, every story I wrote, I kept a carbon copy of that story. They're all right in there. They're all there. After the Defender, I got offered a job at the Gary, Indiana Post-Tribune, which then was owned by Knight Ridder newspaper chain. That would have been 1976. And I spent about 15 years there. Started off as a general salary reporter, left as a news editor. went through all of it. It's a great experience, really, really great experience. And at that point in time, the Gary Post-Tribune covered all of Northwest Indiana. It didn't just cover Gary, Indiana, or the surrounding area like Maryville and Crown Point and Valpo and stuff like that. It covered the 9 counties of Northwest Indiana, and we covered the General Assembly in Indianapolis. And as news editor, all that was my beat, all my responsibility. You know? So yes, I learned a lot. And then I got offered a job at the Chicago Tribune, so I spent another 19 years there. And that was great too. Personally, at 73, I'm still too young to have had any direct experience with the Green Book itself. I did not. My parents did. We had a copy. My dad kept it in the car for the most part. Sometimes it was in our home. I never picked it up, never looked at it. Again, I'm a little kid. When I was somewhere between 6 and 8, so this would have been either 1955, 6, or 1957. My family, we didn't travel by car, we traveled by train. There used to be a train station on East 63rd Street on the south side of East 63rd, somewhere between what's now King Drive and Cottage Grove. And you could take trains from that station. Again, it was in the heart of the black community back then. And we didn't go downtown to Union Station and stuff like that. We went there, you could take trains all over the country. So my family and I, we took the train to Nashville, Tennessee. I had family there. My uncle had a whole bunch of kids, and his wife, and other uncles and their wives. They had a big doggone farm. Anyway, well, the story was traumatic story in a way. Their farm was just outside Nashville. We got there late at night. By that time, the children had already been killed. I'm a little kid. I knew nothing about that. That was completely over my head, you know. I may have seen it in the news, maybe, but it still just washed over me. And my sisters were younger than me. My youngest sister, she would have been somewhere between 2, 3, maybe 4 years old. But we got there late at night, and my Uncle Tom Crawford picked us up. He had the Green Book too. He took us on back roads, no street lights. At some point, my mom, me and my sisters were in the back seat, and Uncle Tom was driving, and my mom and dad were in the front seat. And the cars back then, you didn't have the bucket seats, right? We had just one seat, right? So three could sit side by side. At some point, and I never knew why, they instructed the three of us to get down on the floor in the back seat, to lay down on the floor and to be quiet. And they covered us with a blanket. And I can't remember how long we drove under that blanket. It was already dark anyway, and that blanket, I mean, your sensory, all your sensory stuff just went away. It just went away. Not a bad, no bad occurrences. Nobody stopped the car, nothing like that. We got to the farm. They took us out, everything was fine. But interestingly enough, I conferred with my sisters. One's in California, the other one lives here in the city. Diane's about 18 months younger than me. And Diane told me, as I'm asking her about that trip and the experience, if she remembered it, she says, yeah, I remember it. She said, but you know what? I had totally forgotten about being underneath that blanket in the back of the car. But now that you tell me now, I remember. But she says, you know, I never really understood why, but for all my life, and even right up to today, I don't like being in the back seat of cars. I actually get paranoid. I get claustrophobic, and I can only stand it for so long, and then I've got to either get out of the car or I've got to get up in the front. And so we discussed it. Do you think that experience back then had anything to do with that? Well, really can't answer. You can't know. You can only surmise, you can only guess. But I don't like riding in the back seat of cars either. I'm not as bad as Diane, I don't freak out about it, but I am uncomfortable being in the back seat of a car. I don't remember too much about the train trip itself. If you're referring to Jim Crow, Mason-Dixon line and that stuff. I don't remember us having to move from one car to another car or anything like that. I don't remember being mistreated, by anybody, black or white or green or yellow. But again, I was a little kid. I can't answer the affirmative. I can tell you as far as my relatives, my family, I had a lot of, they would have been great uncles, okay? They were the brothers of my grandmother. They were much older than my dad. They had it. They talked about it. They would talk about traveling in the South. Some of them traveled in the South a lot. They did not like it. My mother, as I said, her people. It's interesting. My great-grandfather, he and his family lived in Nashville. I never met him. He died before I was born. His name was Levi Crawford. He had 3 other brothers. All of them left the South and came north. My great uncle James went to New York, stayed in New York. Some came here, Chicago. My mother did not like the South. She wouldn't let us. That trip that we took on the train, that was the only time the 3 of us were allowed to go across the Mason-Dixon line. My relatives down there would ask my mom from time to time, okay, summer's coming up, kids gonna be out of school, how about sending them down or bringing them down, whatever, let them spend a few weeks or spend a month or spend the whole summer with us. Got lots of land, lots of stuff. We've got photographs, still black and whites. We rode horses. They had horses, right? All kinds, it's neat, just a little kid. But my mom would not let us go. Years later, my father was an electrical technician, worked for Kellogg switchboards. They were located in Cicero, on Cicero. And in 1962, they relocated to Tennessee, I think Memphis, and he was offered to keep his job if he was willing to relocate. And by that time, 62, I would have been either 12 or 13. I would have made 13 in April of 62. So I remember those discussions, he and my mom. He didn't want to go anyway, but he, out of courtesy, he ran it by my mom. They discussed it. They discussed it in front of us at the dinner table. We sat there, we listened. They actually asked us for our input as well. But I think they already knew what they were going to do, but they asked us little kids for our input. But in the end, my dad decided not to take that job. He was not going to take his family at that point in time. He was going to take us down. And it's interesting. My sisters and I, even to this day, occasionally, I talk to them a lot, at least once or twice a week. And we discuss how, of course, you can't know the answer, but what would our lives have been like if we had gone down there? would we have gotten the educations that we did get if we had gone down there at that point in time, with all the stuff that was going on down there at that time? I mean, we know you wouldn't have gotten the educations. What kind of people would we have turned out to be if we had made that trip, gone down there? You know? What if, right? All the what ifs. That's life, right? That's life. It's a whole series of what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. That history of the South, American history. Wow. I've made it my business to study this stuff inside out, upside down, forwards and backwards, my whole adult life, actually even before I became an adult, studying this stuff. In part so I know who I am, you know, so I can teach my kids who they are.